It is game 3 of the World Chess Championship, and we find ourselves right back where it all started. Kasparov opens with e4, Kramnik responds with e5, and once again, he chooses the Berlin defense. It is a completely replay of game 1, and at this point, the question on everyone's mind was, can Kasparov find the difference this time? Can Kasparov defeat and break down the Berlin Wall this time? Well, let's see. The game continues with bishop d7, then comes b3, h6, bishop b2, king c8. All of this move mirroring the same sequence from game 1. This time, Kasparov chooses rook to d1. Kramnik replies with b6 and Kasparov continues with knight to e2, preparing to infiltrate with his knight and pawn, searching for a way to break through the Berlin setup. Unknown to everybody during this championship match, as Kasparov and Kramnik sat across the board, there were two special spectators in the crowd who were also watching, but with a different kind of tension. Who were these people? One of them was Leon, who was a die-hard Kasparov fan, and he was certain there was no way Kasparov would lose 2 games at a time using the same opening. The other spectator was named Boris, who favored Kramnik's calm precision. The most interesting thing about these two spectators was that back home, they had a one-room apartment and had nothing but a table, a one chessboard, and poster of their hero taped to cracked walls. They were unable to place a bet, so they made a pact. The pact was that if Kasparov won, Boris would slap Kramnik, and if Kramnik won, Leon would find a way to walk through the crowd, walk through the pressmen, just to slap Kasparov. With these two bets, the stage was set for one of the craziest events in a World Championship match. So now, as the pieces shifted and the clock ticked, the game on the board was mirrored by a quieter one in the audience, one with no prizes, just consequences. The game continued with Kasparov establishing his knight firmly in the center with knight d5, but Kramnik responds precisely, knight e7, followed by rook e1 and rook g8. It is stubborn, solid defense from Kramnik, and he refuses to give Kasparov any target in his position. Then comes g5, followed by rook g6 and bishop g7. All of Kramnik's pieces arriving at the perfect moment, coordinating flawlessly in defense. A few moves later, Kramnik captured both of Kasparov's knights, tightening his grip on the position. Then he calmly plays knight to c6, and this was the position after 28 moves. Kramnik completely in control, his defense unbroken. And after another 25 moves, the two players agreed to a draw on move 53. This draw actually saved us from witnessing one of the most cinematic moments in chess world championship history. If any of these two players had won, would have been able to see Garry Kasparov or Vladimir Kramnik get slapped by one of their passionate fans? Well, that will be some cinematic event that will make it to movies. The result of this third game meant one thing. Twice, Kramnik had successfully neutralized Kasparov's e4 opening, and from that moment on, in his remaining games with the white pieces, Kasparov abandoned e4 altogether, switching to c4 in search of new ground. But guess what? Even this new direction did not yield much for Kasparov. Kramnik met his new ideas with a symmetrical English, quiet, balanced, and to most eyes, painfully dull. Both sides mirrored each other like reflections in still water. And that was the narrative for the World Championship match till they got to Game 8. So against all odds, at Game 8, Kasparov, who was described as an unstoppable champion, found himself behind, and the world begins to wonder, has the fire dimmed, or is the storm about to return? In the next game, Garry switches things up. He brings out knight to f6, stepping into the territory of the Nimzo Indian defense, a clear sign that he is looking for a fresh fight and a new battleground. Queen to c2 is played, Kasparov castles, and after a3, the exchanges begin. Takes, and then b6. Black trades off the bishop for the knight, and now Kasparov looks to claim control, establishing his grip on the light squares from the wing and steering the game into territory where he feels at home. And then a fascinating idea from Kasparov erupts: bishop to g5. It is subtle, creative, and full of tension. The kind of move that doesn't shout, but whispers a threat that lingers in the air. Kasparov responds with h6, followed by d5, striking in the center. In many Nimzo-Indian structures, this is where white accepts a small structural weakness, usually after they play e3, in exchange for active play. Here, Kramnik decides to capture on d5. Kasparov immediately recaptures with the knight. Knight takes on d5, keeping the tension in the center alive. The queens come off the board, a trade in the center, and the knight calmly retreats back to d5. Kramnik follows up with bishop to f2, quietly building and rebuilding his position and preparing for the long game ahead. And now, the dust begins to settle from the opening. One side holds the bishop pair while the other boasts a massive lead in development. It is a familiar theme, just like in the earlier Grunfeld game. Kasparov doesn't mind sacrificing the bishop pair or even a pawn if it means getting activity, if it means his pieces come alive fast and first. And here, Kasparov lashes out with c5. When you are ahead in development, you need to hit before your opponents can fully coordinate their forces. So, c5 is a powerful break in the center. Kramnik immediately replies with bishop to b5, targeting the knight and asking Kramnik the all-important question: how far are you willing to push this attack? The knight is protected and the pawn lunges forward, attacking the knight. And we see knight to c7, a move that at first glance looks like a blunder. It seems black is simply about to lose a pawn. But then, Kasparov strikes. He unleashes f5, a brilliant, explosive counterpunch. Takes and takes again. At first glance, it looks tempting. You could just gobble up that pawn and walk away with two connected passes on the queen side. But not so fast, because if you do so, the position transforms into something sharp, unstable, and far from clear. This is Kasparov in full attack mode, swarming Kramnik before he can finish developing. The pressure is relentless. Kramnik takes a breath, realizing he can't hold everything. He plays knight to e2, deciding to give back the pawn just to free his position, and most importantly, to finally get his king to safety. Now, Kasparov rooks come flying in, rook to d2, crashing into Kramnik's position and turning up the pressure. Kramnik responds with knight to c5, chasing the bishop away, and then pushes b4, trying to gain space. But here is a problem. b4 weakens the very foundation it was meant to strengthen. In trying to push Kasparov back, Kramnik has begun to destabilize his own structure. And now, rook to f8. A beautiful move by Kasparov, playing entirely on the initiative. The tension is electric. And no, you can't take that pawn because rook to g2 would follow, and that's checkmate territory. So instead, rook to a2, looking to trade and relieve the pressure. The exchange takes, but Kasparov's momentum doesn't stop there. The knight leaps forward, driving straight into the action. We get bishop to d4. Kramnik's idea here is clear. He wants to trade rooks and cool down the position. But no, Kasparov refuses. Rook to a1. He keeps the pressure alive. Every move loaded with intent. And now, Kramnik faces a crucial decision. Does he play rook to f3, holding the position together, but condemning himself to a life of pure passivity? Or does he choose the practical path, knight to c3, willingly giving up a pawn in pursuit of an endgame where the extra pawn might mean nothing at all? A choice between safety and freedom, between holding and fighting. That central pawn may sit right in the middle of the board, but in truth, it is not much of an asset, more of a target than a strength. So play continues with bishop to d4, then b5, as both sides maneuver for control. Kramnik brings his rook to f4, anchoring his position and trying to fortify the dark squares, where the real battle is now being fought. And now, rook to g4, a direct, forcing move that practically compels g5. Kasparov pushes the pawn, but Kramnik immediately strikes back with h4. Bold, aggressive counterplay. It's a clash on both wings now, a tense balance between pressure and defense. We get takes and takes again. The tension explodes on the king side. It is impossible to capture on g5 here because if you do that, you will lose the bishop on the spot. So instead, Kramnik calmly plays king to f2, volunteering a second pawn, a bold act of faith in the position, trusting that activity and coordination will matter more than material. But in this position, the players agreed to a draw because despite 2 pawns down, there is simply no way Garry Kasparov is going to win this game. At this point, they were both short on time and there was just this mutual recognition. Even apart from that, if you look at the position, the pawns are split. If they were connected, obviously, we could try e5, bishop to e1, and maybe the dream of promoting. But here, I don't think we would ever make a queen. You can even try king to g4, fine. And the response will be bishop to g3. You go forward and I'll take the pawn. The position is not clear, so it was just safe for both of them to agree to a draw. So Kramnik, the ever pragmatist, identifies the only defensive part all the way back here. Instead of clinging to material and getting crushed, he sacrifices wisely, holds firm, and even manages to neutralize Garry Kasparov's raging initiative. It was a draw again. Kramnik still led by a point. But people still had it at the back of their mind that Garry Kasparov was going to come back, that it was only a matter of time. The truth would eventually reveal itself. Form is different from class. But would Garry be able to come back? Or would Vladimir Kramnik eventually crack? And also, who exactly are the two friends that were watching the championship match that made a friend, Boris and Leon? And why is their story so undercovered in the whole of chess, even till today? Well, smash that subscribe button so you're not going to miss out on the next part of this interesting and complicated Vladimir Kramnik story. Please smash that subscribe button and get us to 2K while you wait till I drop the next part next week. Till that time, please, you can still watch the part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this video on my YouTube channel. You can check through the studio. I'm also going to link it here so that you can just go start from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3. I'm 100% sure that you are going to enjoy it. If this is the first time you're watching any of my videos, welcome to my YouTube channel. And if you are a subscriber already, you know how it is at the end of the video. See you next week. Bye. Thank you.